Hi, welcome to the first episode of Infinity Insight. I'm so excited and pleased to bring you in this podcast on poverty and inequality. Infinity Insight is about understanding the root causes and finding solutions for tackling poverty and inequality. I'm Ali, CEO and founder of New Consultancy Services, which is an early stage startup working in sustainable development solutions, particularly the United Nations agenda, goal number one, poverty in all its forms everywhere, and as well, goal number 10, reduce inequality between and among countries. Well, honestly, when I decided to launch this podcast on poverty and inequality, I thought maybe it's better idea to ask ChatGPT for offering some names. And he said, well, there were some really interesting names, including Voice of the Voiceless, Wealth of Change, Pathway to Progress, and so on. But for some reason, I choose Infinity Insight due to I do believe tackling poverty and inequality as a really huge global problem. They are so complicated and need the Infinity Insight. I mean, raising poverty and inequality undermines social cohesion and increasing political and social tensions. So my colleagues and I work in this idea, and we strongly believe public awareness about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals must be raised due to our world still experiencing massive gap to achieving these goals. I mean, we have less than 6 years until the end of this agenda, and that's the reason we are trying to find the solutions and tackling this problem. But I have to say, maybe I'm not a professional guy to recording this podcast. Honestly, this is my first experience as a non-native English speaker who even didn't set up any professional microphone or camera to capture the video, record the voice. I mean, it's probably, as you can realize, I use my laptop camera and use my phone to record the voice. And perhaps we're going to have some problem with the background noises and the quality of this video because of the background light. And I'm still in a really noisy place, but hopefully that will be okay. Let's do it together. I really appreciate it if you guys going to support us. I mean, giving feedback, share this video with friends, subscribe to our channel, and talking about United Nations agenda, talking about poverty, talking about inequality in your circle. You can be part of our solutions. I mean, believe it or not, we can make a difference together. Okay, let's back to our topics: poverty and inequality. We want to go back to September 2015, where 193 member states of the United Nations adopted 2030 agenda for sustainable development and committed themselves to 17 sustainable development goals. While we're in the middle of the schedule, unfortunately, more than 10% of the world population living on the daily income less than $2.15, which is an indicator for poverty line and not being poor. And we have to remember when we're talking about poverty and inequality, they reflect real challenge faced by real human beings living in a real communities around the globe. So in this podcast, I want to unpack seemingly simple topics and explore them from different perspectives, combining a wide range of experts from academia, policy, and practice. And of course, we can look at poverty and inequality in a different way. You know, few issues have been essential over the suite of human history as fighting to overcome poverty and tackling the tension caused by inequality. And as I said, I will try to bring many perspectives together because poverty and inequality are just an academic subject. And I'm here to enrich our collective understanding of what poverty and inequality really mean for people who are confronting their practical implications and to help inform cooperation to tackle underlying challenges in a community around the world. So, in my opinion, poverty and all its form everywhere and reduce inequality within and among countries are the base of achieving sustainable development goals. So let's continue with asking these two simple and the same time important questions. What does it mean for a person to be poor, or what does it mean for society to be unequal? In the simplest term, poverty is a word we use to describe living a condition of scarcity of people's financial resources, of essential services, or access to life opportunities. Inequality is a word we use to describe gaps between people, especially between people who don't have much and people who might have a lot. During next upcoming episode, we will discuss many different ways of thinking about what poverty and inequality really are, from concept to measurement. We will also discuss reason why of some people are poor or inordinately subject to inequality, and perhaps most importantly, we will discuss how poverty and inequality can change over time, plus some other ideas and evidence and what to do about it. Consider this first big point. There is no single way to think about either poverty or inequality. Each one has many potential definitions reflecting many different types of underlying issue. Let's start with poverty. There are so many different ways to think about what counts as poor. The most common starting point is to consider incomes. You know, how much a person earns or can afford to consume. Typically, a society defines its own minimum threshold of income to not being poor. This might be done by looking at the essential amount for a minimum basket of food, clothing, shelter, and similar. Then estimating how much the basket costs, and then estimating how many people can or cannot afford the basket. Alternatively, some societies define poverty by looking at average income and then estimating a minimum fraction of that, such as half the median, to define poverty. When a society defines poverty in a way like this, it's often described as a measure of relative poverty, meaning relative to society's own benchmark, whether a minimum basket or an average income. But a totally different way to look at poverty is look at the absolute standard across countries. This leads to common definition of extreme income poverty. It set an absolute benchmark for the most extreme form of human deprivations. But as you know, money isn't the only thing matching in our life. There are many other ways to measure who is poor or who is not. How about the simplest issue of health and survival? Measure through things like life expectancy, or how do we even get to life, or whether your own children get to life past their fifth birthday. How about whether you have access to all your basic needs? I mean, food, shelter, clothing, education, healthcare, electricity, clean water, a bank account, or even internet access, much more. How about whether you are even happy with your own life? There are just some of the different ways of thinking about poverty that we are going to explore in this podcast. Now, let's turn to inequality. Again, There are some different ways of thinking about inequality. One way is to think of distribution of income or asset within society. Let us stick with income to keep things simple. In a perfectly equal society, everyone has the same income. In a perfectly unequal society, one person gets pretty much all income, and perhaps everyone else gets relative breadcrumbs. But we know what is usually more complicated than this big swim. So, how do we measure this case in between? We can think about everything from ratio that comparing incomes across different points of income distribution to a measured index of where society lies on the spectrum of perfect income equality to perfect inequality. We'll also look at the challenge of inequality between countries, and we can also think about who is getting left behind and why. This is the central theme of sustainable development goals to leave no one behind, starting with those that are the furthest behind first. But the key point to note is that there are multiple ways of measuring inequality within and across society. Moreover, there is another key point to stress. Things can change over time. That means inequality within the society often take a long time to address, but even this can change. Compared to 25 years ago, there are roughly a billion people living in extreme poverty around the world. It's a massive change. Many countries have achieved important decline in their domestic poverty rate. Even a relatively rich country like Canada, after many years of stagnation in its domestic poverty, the rate is cut by roughly a third just since 2015. And over the 2 decades since 2000, countries ranging from Bolivia to Moldova to Rwanda have registered a sharp decline in their Gini coefficients, which is one measure of inequality. So the point is that poverty and inequality don't need to be permanent. Things can change, an idea about poverty and inequality and academic work around them are continually evolving. Since Adam Smith first published The Wealth of Nations in 1776, social scientists have been arguing over the causes and the remedies of poverty and inequality. So that means there have been massive shifts in thinking about market-oriented approaches, government-driven approaches, and then so-called mixed economy approaches. In a recent decade, there have been major improvement in the measurement of poverty and inequality around the world, and there have been also huge advances and correspondingly huge debates on thinking about how to tackle poverty and inequality around the globe, ranging from large-scale policy change to very specific randomized control trials of very specific interventions. Even today, there are different views among economists to continue to enrich our understanding of this issue. Okay, it's time to wrap up. Let's make long story short. Today we have introduced some basics of income, poverty, and inequality, while stressing that poverty and inequality are ultimately much more than income. We all know money can matter, but it's far from the only thing that matters in our life. Through the empirical side, we are going to look at some real example around the globe and try to understand the complexity of the root causes and find solutions tackling the poverty and inequality. We'll also look at policy approaches and some tools to addressing poverty and inequality in a variety of contexts, all with the aims of helping us get a better sense of which of us can do to make a difference. So, stay with me for the next episode. I will see you soon.